I think the most important thing is the template rigidity. Templates are too rigid, and it just cuts the flow of the creativity of a teacher, right? So that was one thing that I came across. And I do not see, the teacher has a lot of ideas in her mind, but because of the template rigidity, I don't see it in the lesson plan. Yeah.
So Greshma, let's stop there for a moment, because I think what you're raising to the forefront is so true for not just educators in India, but all across the world around the notion of template rigidity. Something that Heidi Hayes-Jacobs and I started to imagine, the idea that a curriculum needs room to breathe, right? So when it feels too scripted, too structured, too enclosing, it doesn't have that kind of energy, that life force that only the teacher with her students or his students can actually bring to bear. So I think it's another interesting dynamic of how can we continue to grow that capacity in some of the work. So again, it was just such an interesting, powerful idea.
Yeah. And I think secondly, the second point is the lengthy lesson plan. The exhaustive lesson plan. Even as a teacher, it took me so much time to only write the lesson plan that I had to compromise on the implementation of the lesson plan. And as a school leader, when I was reading these lesson plans, it was even more exhaustive for me to even read and understand the lesson plan. Yeah. So I think the lengthy lesson plan was the second issue that I have come across in my experience, and even when I interact with other educators. I think the third point is also the relevance of the template sections. Not every section is relevant to the unit or the topic that is happening. Now, in this process, what happens is, for example, if it is a technology integration is one section, right? But then the nature of the unit is that you cannot integrate in this particular topic. So the teacher will put it blank, and the school leader who's actually reading the lesson plan thinks that the teacher is being lazy and not filling up the lesson plan. So both ways it didn't work actually. Sometimes teachers are also just filling it up because the lesson plan has to be filled completely, but there's no relevance to it.
So it's also so fascinating, Greshma, and that the idea of what the lesson plan template or format looks like. One of the most important parts for us as authors, and also what's sort of resonating and fascinating for you, is the idea that a lesson plan template should be sort of organizing the thinking and the actions that are happening in the classroom. I remember speaking with a teacher 2 weeks ago, and she said, our lesson plan template takes us longer to fill out than it does to actually teach. And so when you're trying to make sense of that level of due diligence that teachers are doing, because sometimes we're very good at filling out forms, but the forms should actually help elevate the thinking and the imagination and the wonderment, as opposed to feeling like it's just a bureaucratic exercise that actually makes the learning less likely to have that energy.
Right. So I just feel that relevance is absolutely not there. So there should be a flexibility for teachers in terms of template of the lesson plan. Many times there's no alignment of learning objectives in the lesson plan, So that is also one thing, the complete alignment is missing, and even the curriculum units and the classroom activities feel like those, isolated islands. Which are not connected.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I think the one important challenge that even was mentioned in your book was the empty vessel approach, where you turn on the faucet and, we are just filling in the information. That is so true, because, we are just giving information and children are just absorbing the information. And I think because of all these, and there are a couple of things like even the differentiation instruction, that many a time templates do not have space or that provision for teachers to really have cater to different learning styles of children. The assessment integration is missing, and of course the time management. It takes so much of the time, like you said. And I think one more thing that is missing is where teacher do not get, there's no section where teacher is actually reflecting. What happened, how did my lesson go, how did my lesson plan, was it in the flow, was it missing? There's no space for teachers to reflect. And because of all this, there are many schools who prefer buying the curriculum, purchasing the lesson plans, and not creating the curriculum for the school.